Jogging in the dark. I'm Tom, 29, trying to become a writer. Not an easy job, let me tell you. I've lived in New York City my whole life, and Central Park was always a kind of escape for me. Growing up, I'd spend hours exploring its paths and ponds. These days, I jog there to clear my mind, hoping to shake off the writer's block that's been driving me crazy. It was just another evening run, the sun dipping below the skyscrapers, casting long shadows over the park. As I jogged past the playground and the familiar statue of Alice in Wonderland, I saw her for the first time. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, standing by a tree, staring at me. She looked like she'd stepped out of a history book. "Hey kid, you lost?" I called out, slowing my pace. She didn't respond, just kept staring. I shook my head, figuring she was with her parents somewhere close by, and continued my run. But then, it got weird. I swear, every time I glanced back, she was there, just standing and watching. It was creepy. I tried to brush it off, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe the stress from my novel was getting to me. I picked up my pace, my heart thudding a bit harder. Not just from the exercise, but from a growing sense of unease. As I rounded the corner near the lake, an old man bumped into me. "Watch it," I muttered, but he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Some spirits in this park never rest, young man. Be careful where you tread," he said, his eyes intense and almost glowing in the dim light. Before I could respond, he shuffled away, disappearing into the shadows. "Sure, buddy," I muttered under my breath, shaking off the encounter. The whole park seemed to be getting on my nerves tonight. When I got home, Anna, my girlfriend, was waiting with dinner. "You're late," she said, peeking at me over her book. "Yeah, weird run tonight. Saw this girl in old clothes and then some old guy told me to watch out for spirits," I said, trying to sound casual, but I could feel a shiver run down my spine as I spoke. Anna laughed, her practical nature always a grounding force. "Tom, you need to lay off the horror stories. They're starting to mess with your head." "Maybe you're right," I replied, forcing a smile. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something had started that night, something that would change everything. I decided to stick to my routine, even though the memory of the girl and the old man lingered in my mind. The air was crisp, and the leaves rustled in a way that seemed almost whispery. As I ran, the familiar sights of the park seemed different, like they were hiding secrets just out of view. The first strange thing I noticed was the smell. Normally, the park smells like grass and trees, maybe a hint of hot dog from a vendor. But that night, there was a faint scent of something old and musty, like an attic that hasn't been opened in years. It made my nose wrinkle and my pace quicken. As I approached the pond, the one where I'd nearly drowned as a kid, a chill ran down my spine. The water was eerily still, reflecting the darkening sky like a black mirror. I could almost see myself as a kid, struggling and gasping for air. Shaking off the memory, I pressed on, trying to focus on the steady rhythm of my footsteps. "Tom, you're imagining things," I muttered to myself, but the words felt hollow. Just then I heard it, a giggle, a child's giggle, high and soft, carried by the wind. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. The park was supposed to be empty, or at least not have any kids playing around this late. I scanned the area, but there was no one in sight. Just trees and shadows, shifting with the breeze. I told myself it was just the wind, but my instinct screamed otherwise. The feeling of being watched was back, stronger than before. Trying to shake off the unease, I resumed jogging, but every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig seemed louder, more menacing. The park, which had always been my haven, now felt like a trap. Near the playground, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A small, worn-out doll, its face cracked and dirty, sitting upright on a bench. It wasn't there yesterday. I knew because I always passed this spot. Who would leave a doll like that? I didn't touch it, just stared for a moment before backing away. The giggle echoed again, and this time, it sounded closer. I bolted, running faster than I ever had, my breath coming in ragged gasps. When I finally reached the edge of the park, I doubled over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. The streetlights and passing cars were a relief, their normalcy a stark contrast to the park's eerie vibe. Back home, Anna was waiting, a worried look on her face. "Tom, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, coming over to me. "Maybe I have," I replied, half joking but mostly serious. I told her about the giggles and the doll. She listened, her brow furrowing. "Tom, it's just your mind playing tricks. You've been under a lot of stress." "Yeah, maybe you're right," I agreed. But the unease didn't leave me. As we sipped our tea, I couldn't help but glance at the window, half expecting to see that little girl staring back at me. The park had always been a place of peace, but now it felt like it was hiding something dark, something waiting to be uncovered. It's funny how stress can mess with your mind, twist it until you don't know what's real anymore. That's what it felt like over the next few days. Central Park wasn't just a place to run anymore. It was a constant source of unease, creeping into every corner of my life. Anna noticed the change in me right away. "Tom, you're barely eating. What's going on?" she asked one evening, concern etching lines into her usually calm face. "I don't know, Anna. It's just the park. I can't get it out of my head," I admitted, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. That girl, the giggles, that creepy doll. It's like they're haunting me. Anna sighed, putting down her book and coming to sit beside me. "Tom, you know I love you, but you're letting this get to you too much. It's just your imagination, stress from the novel. You need to focus on reality, not ghosts." Her words stung, but I knew she meant well. "I wish I could, but it feels so real, Anna. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. I hear that giggle." She wrapped her arms around me, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear gnawing at my insides. "Maybe you should talk to someone, get some professional help. It might help you sort out your thoughts." I nodded, though deep down, I felt conflicted. Admitting I needed help felt like admitting I was losing it, that the lines between reality and imagination were blurring too much. As the days went by, things didn't get any better. I found myself snapping at Anna over little things, my patience wearing thin. One evening, I was hunched over my laptop, staring at the blinking cursor on a blank page when she approached me. "Tom, we need to talk," she said softly. "Not now, Anna. I'm trying to write," I replied, though we both knew I hadn't written a single word in days. She persisted, her tone firmer. "No, we need to talk now. You're shutting me out and it's not helping either of us." I slammed the laptop shut, frustration boiling over. "What do you want me to say, Anna? That I'm scared? That I feel like I'm losing my mind? Because I do, and you keep telling me it's all in my head." Tears welled up in her eyes, and immediately I felt guilty. "I'm sorry, Tom. I'm just worried about you. I don't know how to help." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I know, and I'm sorry too. It's just, I feel like I'm drowning in this. Like there's something I need to figure out, but I don't know what it is." Anna hugged me tightly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "We'll get through this together, okay? Whatever it is, we'll face it." Her words were a small comfort, but the fear still lingered, whispering at the edges of my mind. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept drifting back to the park, to the girl and the old man's warning. I decided I had to go back, to face whatever was haunting me. I needed answers, and I couldn't get them from the safety of my apartment. The next day, I laced up my running shoes, ready to dive back into the unknown. As I stepped out the door, Anna called after me, her voice tinged with worry. "Tom, be careful, okay?" "I will," I promised, though I wasn't sure if I could keep it. The park was calling, and I had to answer, no matter what waited for me in the shadows. Running through the familiar paths, the same unease wrapped around me like a second skin. But I pushed on, determined to uncover the truth. Little did I know, I was stepping deeper into a nightmare that would test the very limits of my sanity. I started my jog just before dusk, the park bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. It felt almost peaceful, but I knew better. The calm was just a facade. As I ran, the air grew cooler, and the shadows lengthened, creeping across the paths like dark fingers. I found myself at the pond again, the water still and glassy. The memory of nearly drowning as a kid flashed through my mind, but I forced it away. I wasn't that scared little boy anymore. I was here for answers. "Lucy," I called out, my voice echoing across the water. "What do you want?" Silence, and then a faint ripple disturbed the surface of the pond. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath misting in the air. That's when I saw her. Lucy, standing on the opposite shore, her old-fashioned dress billowing in an unseen breeze. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. She didn't speak, just pointed to the water. I followed her gaze and saw something horrifying. Just beneath the surface, barely visible in the fading light, were skeletal remains. My stomach lurched, and I stumbled back, nearly falling. "No, no," I whispered, but I knew it was real. Lucy's parents. The pieces were falling into place, and it was worse than I'd imagined. "You have to help me," a soft, whispery voice said. I looked up and saw Lucy standing right in front of me. I hadn't seen her move, but there she was, close enough to touch. Her eyes were filled with a deep, unending sadness. "How?" I asked, my mind racing. She pointed to a spot near the water's edge. "They were taken from me, hidden. You have to find them." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of responsibility. As I started digging with my hands, the ground was surprisingly soft, like it wanted to give up its secrets. Minutes felt like hours, my hands growing numb from the cold and the effort. Then, I hit something hard. Bones. I pulled them out, one by one, my mind numb with horror. This was real. Lucy's parents had been murdered and hidden here all these years. I looked up at her, expecting gratitude, but her expression had changed. "Thank you," she whispered, and for a moment, her face softened. But then her eyes darkened, and I realized too late that freeing her parents' spirits hadn't freed Lucy. The ground beneath me shifted, and suddenly, I was falling into the cold, dark water. Lucy's hands were on me, pulling me down, her grip like iron. Panic surged through me as I struggled, the water closing over my head. "No, no, no!" I screamed, bubbles escaping my mouth as I fought to break free. My lungs burned, and my vision blurred. Was this how it was going to end? But then, through the murky water, I saw something, a light. I reached for it with everything I had left, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. I dragged myself onto the shore, coughing and sputtering. Lucy stood at the edge of the water, watching me with a look of pure rage. "You can't escape," she hissed, her voice echoing in my mind. I scrambled to my feet, backing away. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry." She didn't follow, just stood there, her figure slowly fading until she was gone. The park was silent again, but I knew it wasn't over. Lucy was still there, still waiting. I stumbled home, drenched and shivering. Anna was there, her face pale with worry. "Tom, what happened?" she cried, rushing to help me. "I saw her, Anna. I saw Lucy," I said, my voice shaking. "She's not at peace. She's angry." Anna hugged me tightly, her warmth a small comfort against the cold fear that still gripped me. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "We'll find a way to help her." But as I sat there, trembling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd opened a door that couldn't be closed. And whatever was on the other side was far from done with me. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and frantic research. I pored over old maps and records of Central Park, trying to find any clue that could help put Lucy to rest. But every lead seemed to end in a dead end. Anna did her best to support me, but I could see the worry in her eyes growing. One evening, Anna came home with a thick, dusty book. "I found this at the library," she said, laying it on the table. "It's about the history of Central Park. Maybe there's something in here that can help." I flipped through the pages, my hope rising. There were stories of hauntings and disappearances, but nothing specific about Lucy or her parents. Still, it was something. "Thanks, Anna. This might be useful." As I read, I came across a section about hidden tunnels beneath the park, used during Prohibition. It sounded promising. "Maybe Lucy's parents were taken through these tunnels," I suggested. Anna frowned. "But how would we find them? The park's huge." "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's worth a shot. We have to try something." The next day, we went to the park together, armed with the book and a flashlight. We wandered through the trees, searching for any sign of an entrance to the tunnels. But hours passed with no luck. The park seemed determined to keep its secrets hidden. "Tom, maybe we're looking in the wrong place," Anna said, her voice edged with frustration. "There's nothing here." I was about to agree when I saw something glinting in the underbrush. I bent down and picked it up, a small, rusted key. My heart raced. "Look at this," I said, showing Anna. "A key? What does it open?" she asked, peering at it. "I don't know, but it's something. Maybe there's a hidden door somewhere," I replied, feeling a surge of hope. We spent the next hour searching for any sign of a lock that matched the key. Finally, we found a small, overgrown door near the base of a large oak tree. I slid the key into the lock, and it turned with a creak. The door swung open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down. "Should we go down?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "We have to," I said, taking her hand. "This might be our only chance." We descended the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was damp and musty, and the walls were lined with old, crumbling bricks. At the bottom, we found a network of tunnels, just like the book had described. As we explored, we found several dead ends and collapsed passages. Just when I was about to give up, we came across a small hidden chamber. Inside, there were old crates and barrels, remnants from the Prohibition era. And in the corner, partially buried under debris, was a small, leather-bound journal. I picked it up and carefully opened it. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but I could make out the handwriting. It was a diary, written by a woman named Margaret, Lucy's mother. "Tom, look at this," I said, my hands shaking. Anna read over my shoulder. It's Lucy's mother. Maybe this will tell us what happened." We sat down and read the diary, our hearts pounding. Margaret wrote about their life in the park, the joy they found there, and the terror that came when they were attacked by a group of men. They were taken to the tunnels, where her husband was killed. Margaret hid Lucy, but she was caught and killed as well. Her last entries were desperate pleas for someone to find Lucy and give her peace. Tears filled my eyes as I read. This is it. This is what we need to free her. But just as I felt a glimmer of hope, Anna pointed to the final page. "Tom, look at this." The last entry was a cryptic warning. "Beware the false guides. They lead only to darkness." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "I don't know, but we have to be careful," Anna replied. "We can't trust everything we see or hear." With renewed determination, we climbed out of the tunnels and headed home, the diary clutched tightly in my hands. I felt like we were finally getting somewhere, but the warning echoed in my mind. casting a shadow over our discovery. As we stepped back into the apartment, the air felt heavy with anticipation. We had the key to freeing Lucy, but we also had a new mystery to solve. Who or what were the false guides? And how would we know when we encountered them? The park seemed to have more layers than we could have ever imagined, each one darker and more twisted than the last. And as we delved deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something or someone was always one step ahead of us. In the quiet of the night, as Anna slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the words of the diary replaying in my mind. We were closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. The real horror was yet to come, and I had to be ready for whatever lay ahead. The events in Central Park had pushed me to my limits, both physically and mentally. The diary gave us hope, but the cryptic warning about the false guides haunted me. The park, once my sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of horrors, each twist and turn more disorienting than the last. Anna and I returned to the park the next evening, determined to follow the diary's clues. We retraced our steps to the hidden chamber, the air thick with tension. As we approached the entrance, Anna grabbed my hand. "Tom, are you sure about this? What if we're walking into a trap?" "We don't have a choice, Anna. We need to help Lucy, and this diary is the only lead we have," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Inside the chamber, we searched for any hidden messages or signs. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see Lucy standing there, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You found my mother's words," she said, her voice echoing in the small space. "But you must beware. Not all who seem to help are friends." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Lucy, we want to help you. Tell us what we need to do," I pleaded. "Find the place where the sun never shines. There you will see the truth," she whispered before fading away. Anna and I exchanged puzzled looks. "The place where the sun never shines? What does that mean?" she asked. "I think it's a metaphor. A place hidden in darkness, maybe an underground area or a place always in shadow," I suggested. We spent hours searching, frustration mounting with each dead end. As we passed the pond once more, I noticed something odd about a cluster of trees nearby. Their branches were dense, creating a permanent shadow beneath them. "This must be it," I said, pointing to the trees. We pushed through the undergrowth and found a small, hidden entrance to another tunnel. With a sense of dread, we descended into the darkness, the air growing colder with each step. At the end of the tunnel, we found a small room, its walls covered in ancient markings. In the center, there was a stone altar, and on it lay the remains of Lucy's parents. The sight was both horrifying and heartbreaking. "We did it," I whispered, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. But as we approached the altar, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the old man from before, his eyes glowing with malevolence. "You've come far, but this is where it ends," he snarled. "Who are you?" Anna demanded, stepping protectively in front of me. "I am the keeper of these souls, and I will not let them go," he replied, advancing towards us. Fear surged through me, but I knew we had to act. "Anna, get the remains," I shouted, trying to distract the man. As Anna moved to gather the bones, the man lunged at me. We struggled, his strength far beyond what I expected. But as he pressed me against the wall, I remembered Lucy's warning. This man wasn't real. He was an illusion, a false guide. With all my strength, I pushed him away and yelled, "You're not real, you're just a shadow." The figure flickered, his form wavering before disappearing entirely. I turned to see Anna holding the remains, tears streaming down her face. "We have them, Tom. We can free Lucy now." We carefully placed the bones in a bag and made our way out of the tunnel. As we emerged into the night, I felt a sense of calm, as if the park itself was releasing a long-held breath. At the pond, we laid the remains to rest, saying a quiet prayer. Lucy appeared once more, her form now serene. "Thank you," she whispered before vanishing into the night, finally at peace. But the relief was short-lived. As we walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The park seemed too quiet, the air too still. Anna sensed it too, her hand gripping mine tightly. "Tom, do you think it's really over?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted. "I hope so." As we entered our apartment, a chill ran down my spine. On the table, where we had left the diary, there was a new entry. In the same handwriting it read, "Beware the false guides. They are always watching." I looked at Anna, fear mirrored in her eyes. The park had released Lucy, but it seemed it wasn't done with us. The false guides were still out there, and we were far from safe. The events of those nights had left a mark on us, a lingering shadow that would never fully disappear. And as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder, who or what were the false guides, and what did they want from us? The park's secrets ran deep, and we had only just begun to uncover them. The haunting melody. It all started in Central Park. I'd always loved the place, my own slice of nature right in the middle of the city's chaos. The trees, the paths, the sounds, it was all familiar. I'm Ethan Rivers, a 35-year-old sound engineer. I spend my days capturing sounds, weaving them into something new, something meaningful. But there's something you should know about me. I'm terrified of the dark. This fear, it's not just some childish thing. It goes back to when I was 10. One night, I got lost in a forest near my grandmother's house. I spent hours in the dark, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. It scarred me, you know. That fear never left. Central Park was my escape. I often went there to jog, especially in the evenings. The park had its own symphony. Birds, wind, distant chatter. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. One foggy evening, as I jogged through my usual route, I heard it, a melody. It was soft at first, like a whisper in the wind. I stopped, trying to pinpoint its source, but it seemed to float all around me. "Did you hear that?" I muttered to myself, glancing around. The path was deserted, just me and the thickening fog. The melody grew louder, more insistent. I followed it. My curiosity piqued despite a growing sense of unease. I wasn't alone for long. I stumbled upon Lila Moore, a young violinist who often practiced in the park. She was standing still, her head tilted as if listening to the same melody. "Lila, do you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to me, her eyes wide and slightly vacant. "The music, it's calling. It's beautiful, isn't it?" There was something off about her tone, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the creeping fear. "Yeah, it is, but it's strange." She didn't respond, just continued to listen, swaying slightly to the unseen rhythm. I left her there, the melody still echoing in my ears, and headed home, hoping a good night's sleep would clear my mind. The next day, I couldn't shake the melody from my mind. It lingered, like an echo in a canyon. I decided to head back to Central Park, hoping to record the sound. Maybe it was just another busker with an incredible talent, or perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me. Either way, I needed to find out. The fog had lifted, but the park felt different, almost sinister. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, but there was an underlying mustiness, like old, forgotten places. I set up my equipment near the spot where I'd heard the melody. As I adjusted the microphone, a chill ran down my spine, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees. I shrugged it off and hit record. Hours passed with nothing but the usual sounds. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, distant laughter. I began to pack up, frustrated and tired, when I saw her again, Lila. She was sitting on a bench, her violin case at her feet. She didn't look up as I approached, her fingers moving in the air as if playing an invisible instrument. "Lila," I called out. "Are you all right?" She glanced up, her eyes dull and unfocused. "It's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What's coming?" I asked, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. She shook her head, her expression vacant. "The music. It's not just music." Her words sent a shiver through me. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves, carrying with it a faint, haunting melody. Lila's eyes widened, and she stood abruptly, grabbing her violin case and hurrying away without another word. I watched her leave, my heart pounding. The park, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and every rustle of leaves sounded like a whisper, a warning. As I made my way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The melody echoed in my mind, growing louder and more insistent. I glanced over my shoulder more than once, half expecting to see someone, or something, following me. That night, I dreamt of the park. The trees loomed like giants, and the melody played over and over, drawing me deeper into the fog. I woke up in a cold sweat, the sound still ringing in my ears. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was happening in Central Park, and it wasn't just my imagination. The melody was more than just a beautiful tune. It was a call, and it was only a matter of time before I'd have to answer. Over the next few days, the melody consumed me. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep. Every sound seemed to morph into that haunting tune. I had to understand it, to find its source. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but I brushed off their concerns, assuring them I was just tired. One evening, I ran into Officer Harris while setting up my recording equipment in the park. He was a tall, stern-looking man with a perpetual frown. He'd been patrolling the park more frequently, investigating the recent disappearances. "What are you doing out here so late, Ethan?" he asked, his tone more accusatory than concerned. "Recording," I replied, not looking up from my setup. "There's a melody, something strange. I need to capture it." Harris snorted. "You and your urban legends. People are going missing, Ethan. This isn't a game." I looked at him, my frustration boiling over. "I know it's not a game, Harris. There's something out there, something we can't explain. You're just too stubborn to see it." He narrowed his eyes, his expression hardening. "Don't let your obsession get the best of you. They'll drive you mad." With that, he walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As night fell, the park took on an eerie stillness. The usual sounds faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. My thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and determination. Was I really losing my mind? Or was there something more to this melody? I remembered my grandmother's ghost stories, how she'd always warned me about letting curiosity lead me into danger. But this was different. I wasn't just curious. I was compelled, drawn to the melody like a moth to a flame. Suddenly, the music began again, faint but unmistakable. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes in the dim light. "Ethan," a voice called out, breaking through my trance. It was Lila. She emerged from the shadows, her face pale and drawn. "Lila, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling. She clutched her violin case, her eyes wide with fear. I can't stop hearing it. It's everywhere. It's driving me crazy." I took a step closer, feeling a surge of empathy. "We need to figure this out, Lila, together. There's someone behind this." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "But what if it's too late? What if we're already trapped?" Her words echoed my deepest fears. I wanted to reassure her, to promise we'd find a way out. But the truth was, I didn't know if we would. We spent the next hour searching the park, the melody growing louder and more insistent. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, hunted. As we ventured deeper into the park, Lila's fear mirrored my own. Her hands shook, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Ethan, I can't do this," she whispered. "It's too much." I reached out, taking her hand. "We have to. There's no turning back now." At that moment, I realized how isolated I'd become. My obsession had pushed away my friends, my colleagues, and now, even Lyle was slipping away. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when we were so close to the truth. The melody swelled, filling the air with its haunting beauty. It was as if the park itself was alive, breathing with the music. And in the heart of it all, I knew the answers waited, shrouded in darkness and shadow. Lila and I ventured deeper into Central Park, the haunting melody growing louder with each step. It seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, a sinister rhythm that drove us forward. We moved through the dense foliage, our senses heightened, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig setting us on edge. "Ethan," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't like this. We should turn back." I squeezed her hand, trying to offer some comfort. "We can't, Lila. We need to find out what's behind this." We reached a small, overgrown clearing. In the center stood a crumbling statue of a man playing a violin, his face twisted in anguish. The melody seemed to emanate from the statue itself, enveloping us in its eerie embrace. "Do you think this is it?" Lila asked, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could answer, the air grew colder, and a ghostly figure materialized before us. It was him, the phantom musician. He appeared as a translucent figure, dressed in tattered 19th century clothing, a spectral violin clutched in his bony hands. "Who dares disturb my music?" his voice echoed, filled with a deep, otherworldly anger. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "We're here to find out why you're doing this. Why are you luring people to their doom?" The phantom musician's eyes glowed with a malevolent light. "I was betrayed, murdered by my rival. My symphony remains unfinished, and I am bound to this place until it is complete. I need talented souls to help me." Lila clutched her violin case tighter, her fear palpable. "But why us? Why now?" The ghostly figure's gaze shifted to her, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "You both have the talent I need. Finish my symphony, and I shall be free. Refuse, and you will join the others." A cold dread settled over me. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. I glanced at Lila, her face pale with terror. "We don't have a choice," I said quietly. "We have to finish it." We set up in the clearing, the phantom musician watching our every move. I pulled out my recording equipment, and Lila readied her violin. The melody filled the air, and we began to play, our notes blending with the ghostly music. It was beautiful, yet deeply unsettling. As we played, the phantom musician's form grew more solid, his presence more oppressive. I could feel his rage, his desperation, and it seeped into our music, twisting it into something dark and horrifying. "Ethan, I can't do this," Lila cried, her bow slipping from her trembling fingers. "We have to, Lila," I urged, my own hands shaking. "Just a little longer." The melody reached a fever pitch, and suddenly, the phantom musician lunged at us, his face contorted with fury. "Finish it, now!" In a burst of adrenaline, I grabbed Lila's hand, and we sprinted through the park, the ghostly figure hot on our heels. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches clawing at our clothes. The melody chased us, a relentless force that threatened to consume us. We stumbled into another clearing, breathless and terrified. The phantom musician appeared again, his eyes blazing with anger. "You cannot escape." Desperate, I pulled out my phone and began playing the recording of the unfinished symphony. The ghostly figure paused, his expression softening as the music filled the air. It was a haunting, beautiful piece, filled with sorrow and longing. "This is what you wanted," I said, my voice shaking. "Your symphony finished." The phantom musician's form wavered, his eyes filling with tears. "Yes, but at what cost?" With a final, mournful note, the ghostly figure dissolved into mist, leaving us alone in the eerie silence. The park seemed to exhale, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Lila collapsed to the ground, sobbing. "It's over. It's finally over." I sat beside her, the weight of what we'd done settling over me. "But at what cost?" I echoed, my voice hollow. The park would never be the same for us, and neither would we. The park felt eerily quiet after the phantom musician vanished. Lila and I sat in the clearing, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The oppressive weight that had hung over us seemed to lift, but an unsettling feeling lingered. We'd survived, but at what cost? Lila wiped her tears, her hands still trembling. "What do we do now, Ethan? How do we move on from this?" I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. "I don't know, Lila, but we need to get out of here. We need to." My words were cut off by a rustling sound behind us. We turned to see Officer Harris emerging from the shadows, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "What the hell happened here?" he demanded. I struggled to find the words. It's complicated. There was a ghost, a phantom musician. He wanted us to finish his symphony to free his spirit." Harris' eyes narrowed. "Ghosts? Symphonies? Are you out of your mind, Ethan?" Before I could respond, Lila interjected. "It's true. We saw him. He tried to..." She stopped, her eyes widening as if she'd just remembered something. "Wait, Ethan. Remember the statue? The violinist?" I nodded, recalling the statue's anguished expression. "What about it?" Lila pulled out her phone and began frantically searching for something. "I read an article once about a violinist who was murdered in the park. His rival stole his symphony. What if it's connected?" Harris crossed his arms, skepticism etched across his face. "And how do you plan to prove this wild theory?" Lila found what she was looking for and showed us her phone. It was an old newspaper article about a 19th century violinist named Victor Dumas, who was found dead in Central Park. His symphony was never finished. "This has to be him," she insisted. "The phantom musician." Harris studied the article, his frown deepening. "Even if this is true, what does it mean for us now?" I glanced at the recording equipment we'd left behind. We have to find out if finishing the symphony really set him free, or if there's more to this. We made our way back to my apartment, where we played the recording of the completed symphony. The music was hauntingly beautiful, filled with sorrow and longing. But as the final notes played, something strange happened. The melody began to distort, shifting into a series of dissonant, jarring chords. "What is that?" Lila asked, her face pale. I stared at the recording in disbelief. "I don't know. It's like a hidden message." We listened again, trying to decipher the strange chords. Suddenly, I remembered something my grandmother had told me about hidden messages in music. "It's a code," I realized. "He left us a message." Harris looked skeptical but intrigued. "A message? About what?" We spent the next hour analyzing the recording, piecing together the hidden message. It was a set of coordinates leading to an old abandoned house near the edge of the park. The house had been boarded up for years, a relic of the past. "This can't be a coincidence," Lila said. "We have to check it out." Reluctantly, Harris agreed to accompany us. As we approached the house, a sense of dread settled over me. The windows were shattered, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. We stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under our weight. In the center of the room was an old, dusty piano. Sheets of music were scattered around, covered in Victor Dumas' handwriting. But what caught my attention was a journal hidden beneath the piano bench. I opened it, my hands shaking. The journal detailed Victor's life, his passion for music, and his tragic betrayal. But the final entry sent chills down my spine. It revealed that finishing the symphony wouldn't free his spirit, it would bind whoever completed it to the park, forever. "Oh no," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. "We didn't free him. We took his place." Lila's face went white. "What does that mean for us?" Before I could answer, the melody began to play again, this time coming from the piano. The air grew cold and the ghostly figure of Victor Dumas reappeared, his expression one of sorrow and regret. "You've completed my symphony," he said, his voice a haunting echo. "But the curse remains. One of you must stay, bound to this place, to play the melody and keep my memory alive." Harris stepped back, his face a mask of disbelief. This can't be real. But it was real. Terrifyingly, undeniably real. And now, we had to decide who would take Victor's place, who would be bound to Central Park's haunting melody forever. The realization that one of us had to stay bound to the park hit us like a sledgehammer. We stood there in that old abandoned house, the ghostly figure of Victor Dumas watching us with a sorrowful gaze. The air was thick with despair. "We can't let this happen," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There has to be another way." I looked at her, seeing the fear and determination in her eyes. She was right. We couldn't accept this fate. But the weight of the curse was heavy, and it seemed inescapable. Victor's ghostly form flickered, his expression pained. "I am sorry," he said, "but the curse is strong. One of you must stay." Harris, who had been silent, finally spoke. "This is insane. There's got to be a way to break this curse without sacrificing one of you." I shook my head, feeling a deep sense of hopelessness. "We've tried everything, Harris. This is it." The melody started again, soft and haunting, filling the room with its eerie beauty. It was a reminder of the choice we had to make. Lila and I exchanged a glance, both of us knowing what had to be done. "I'll stay," I said quietly, my voice steady. "This started because of me. It's only right that I end it." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "No, Ethan. We can find another way. We can break the curse together." I shook my head. "No, Lila. You have a life to live, a future. I'm already lost." The decision weighed heavily on us, but there was no turning back. As I stepped towards the piano, ready to accept my fate, Lila grabbed my arm. "Ethan, wait." She looked at Victor, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Is there no other way? Can't we destroy the music, break the curse forever?" Victor hesitated, his form flickering. "The music, it holds my soul. Destroy it, and you may free us all, but it is a risk." I glanced at Lila, seeing the determination in her eyes. "It's a risk we have to take." With trembling hands, I reached for the sheets of music scattered around the piano. As I tore them apart, the melody grew louder, more discordant. The house seemed to shudder, the air growing colder. "Ethan, hurry!" Lila shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. I ripped the final sheet, and the music stopped abruptly. Victor's form flickered one last time, his expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "Thank you," he whispered, before fading into the mist. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood there, the weight of what we'd done sinking in it. The curse was broken, but at what cost? As we made our way out of the house, Harris walked beside us, his face pale. "I don't know how I'm going to explain this," he muttered. "You don't have to," I said. "Some things are better left unsaid." Lila squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, you did it. We're free." I nodded, but a part of me still felt bound to the park, to the haunting melody that had changed our lives forever. As we left the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The trees seemed to whisper, the shadows shifting ominously. The memory of the melody lingered, a ghostly echo that would never truly leave. A few days later, I returned to the park alone, standing in the clearing where it all began. The statue of the violinist was gone, replaced by a new, more serene figure, but the air still felt heavy, as if the park remembered the curse that had been lifted. As I turned to leave, I heard a faint, haunting melody drifting through the trees. My heart skipped a beat, a chill running down my spine. The park was quiet, but the melody persisted, a reminder that some curses are never truly broken. The question lingered in my mind. Had we really freed Victor Dumas, or had we simply taken his place, bound forever to the haunting melody of Central Park?